The Mackenzie family farm awakened with the first blush of dawn, as it had for nearly 2 centuries. Morning light spilled across weathered red barn walls, illuminating the apple orchard's neat rows and the undulating wheat fields beyond. It was the kind of place where time seemed to move more slowly, where the modern world had made only the most necessary of inroads. 12-year-old Mia Harper loved these quiet moments before the farm fully stirred to life. Perched on the fence near the chicken coop, she dangled her legs and watched as the first golden rays touched the highest branches of the oak trees. The animals were already sensing her presence, the horses nickering softly from their stalls, the goats bleating in gentle recognition. Mia had what her grandmother had called the old touch, an almost supernatural connection with animals that had manifested when she was barely old enough to walk. "Morning, Jasper," she whispered, as the family's border collie pressed his cold nose against her palm. "Ready for another day?" The dog's intelligent eyes studied her with what seemed like genuine understanding before he trotted off to begin his self-appointed patrol of the property's perimeter. Mia slid from the fence, landing with practiced ease on the soft earth below. Her morning chores awaited, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, helping her father milk the small herd of dairy cows. While other kids her age complained about school and homework, Mia's greatest challenge was convincing her parents that she could handle the more dangerous farm tasks. They still treated her like she was 9, not almost 13. "Mia, breakfast in 20 minutes." Her mother's voice carried from the farmhouse kitchen window, followed by the mouth-watering scent of bacon and pancakes. "Coming," Mia called back, already moving toward the barn. She knew the routine by heart, had known it since she could first carry a feed bucket. The farm's rhythms were as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Inside the cool darkness of the barn, Mia moved with quiet efficiency, talking softly to each animal as she provided their morning meal. The horses, Thunder, Belle, and old Samson watched her with affectionate eyes as she filled their troughs. The cows lowed appreciatively as she checked their water. Even the barn cats, normally aloof and independent, wound themselves around her ankles as she worked. "You're all so demanding today," she chuckled, bending to scratch behind a tabby's ears. "What's gotten into you?" As Mia worked, her mind wandered to her newest fascination, dragons. The local library had gotten a shipment of fantasy novels, and she devoured them all, captivated by tales of fire-breathing beasts and their magical bonds with humans. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between chores, she'd imagine what it might be like to have a dragon of her own, to soar above the farmland on scaled wings, to share a telepathic connection with a creature of legend. "Dragons aren't real. Harper," she reminded herself aloud, using her last name the way her father sometimes did when he was being especially serious. And even if they were, they wouldn't exactly fit in the hayloft. The animals seemed to watch her with amusement as she finished her chores and headed back to the house. Unaware that her ordinary world was about to collide with the extraordinary in ways she could never have imagined. Mia's parents, Jack and Elise Harper, were already seated at the kitchen table when she entered. Her father's weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, her mother slicing fresh fruit for their breakfast plates. "There she is," Jack smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners beneath his perpetually sun-tanned skin. "How are the troops this morning?" "Fine," Mia replied, washing her hands at the sink. "Though Clover seems like she might be ready to calve soon. She's restless." Jack nodded approvingly. "Good eye, kiddo. We'll keep watch on her today." Elise placed a stack of pancakes in front of Mia. "Eat up. You've got school, and your father and I have to drive into town for supplies afterward." Mia nodded, drizzling maple syrup across her breakfast. The day stretched before her, predictable and comforting in its familiarity. School, homework, afternoon chores, dinner, bed, and then it would all begin again tomorrow. Sometimes she longed for something more, something to break the gentle monotony of farm life. something like the adventures she read about in her books. Little did she know, the universe was about to grant her wish. The eerie trilling sound jolted Mia from a dreamless sleep. She blinked in the darkness of her bedroom, momentarily disoriented as she glanced at the digital clock on her nightstand. 3:14 a.m. The sound came again, high-pitched and unlike anything she'd ever heard on the farm before. Not a coyote or an owl, not any of the barn animals in distress. This was something else entirely, something that sent a shiver racing down her spine. Mia slipped from beneath her quilt, feet finding her rubber boots beside the bed. She pulled a flashlight from her dresser drawer and a sweatshirt over her pajamas. Whatever was making that sound, she needed to investigate. If one of the animals was in trouble, there was no time to wake her parents. The farmhouse was silent as she crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The kitchen door opened with a soft click, and then she was outside, the cool night air raising goosebumps on her arms. The sound came again, more insistent now, definitely from the direction of the barn. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness as Mia crossed the yard, her heart hammering against her ribs. The barn door was closed, just as they'd left it after evening chores. But as she drew closer, she noticed something strange, a soft, pulsing glow emanating from the cracks between the weathered boards. "Hello?" she called, her voice sounding small and frightened in the vastness of the night. "Is someone there?" Only the trilling responded. Higher now, almost like a beckoning. With trembling fingers, Mia pulled open the barn door. The sight that greeted her stole the breath from her lungs. There, in a nest of glowing hoofprints that shimmered with an otherworldly blue light, huddled three small creatures that could only be described as dragons. Each was about the size of a house cat, with iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. They had delicate, translucent wings folded against their bodies, and wide, intelligent eyes that fixed on Mia the moment she entered. "Oh my God," she whispered, the flashlight beam wavering as her hand shook. "Oh my God." The dragons, for they could be nothing else, froze at her approach. Their trilling suddenly silenced. The smallest one, a creature with scales that shimmered predominantly green, made a chirping sound and attempted to hide behind its siblings. Mia took a step closer, mesmerized. The barn animals seemed unnaturally calm, the horses watching from their stalls with placid interest, the cows completely undisturbed. Whatever these creatures were, the farm animals didn't perceive them as a threat. One of the dragons, slightly larger than the others with scales that gleamed sapphire blue, extended its neck toward Mia, nostrils flaring as it scented the air. A thin tendril of smoke curled from its nostrils. That was enough to break the spell. Mia stumbled backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. These weren't just unusual animals, they were impossible creatures. Creatures that shouldn't exist outside of her fantasy novels. "Dad!" she shouted, turning and bolting from the barn. "Dad! Mom! Come quick!" Mia's parents were understandably skeptical when she burst into their bedroom, babbling about baby dragons in the barn. Jack Harper grumbled about sleepwalking and overactive imaginations, but he dutifully pulled on his boots and jacket. Elise, ever the more intuitive of the pair, noted the genuine terror and wonder in her daughter's eyes and followed without complaint. "They were right there," Mia insisted as she led them across the moonlit yard. "In a nest of glowing footprints. They looked right at me." Jack and Elise exchanged concerned glances over their daughter's head. "Honey," Elise began gently, "are you sure it wasn't just a family of raccoons? The moonlight can play tricks." "It wasn't raccoons," Mia interrupted, pulling open the barn door. "Look!" The three of them stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the scene before them. The dragons were exactly where Mia had left them, though now they had arranged themselves in a defensive triangle, the smallest in the center, The blue-tinged hoof prints that formed their nest glowed more intensely in the presence of multiple humans. "Sweet Jesus," Jack breathed, his hand instinctively moving to push Mia behind him. "What in God's name are those things?" Elise's grip on her husband's arm tightened. "Jack, look at their wings, their scales, their—" "Dragons," Mia finished for her, peering around her father's protective stance. "I told you." The moment stretched, reality reshaping itself around the impossible creatures huddled in their barn. The dragons watched the humans with equal parts caution and curiosity, their jewel-toned eyes unblinking in the dim light. Jack was the first to break the silence. "We need to check the farm. Whatever brought these here might still be around." He glanced at the barn doors, which showed no signs of forced entry, then at the ground surrounding the glowing nest. There are no tracks, no footprints except these glowing ones, and they don't lead anywhere. Elise knelt slowly, keeping a respectful distance from the dragons. They look like foal hoofprints, but they're luminescent, and they form a perfect circle. She shook her head in wonder. "Jack, this can't be natural." "Maybe they escaped from somewhere," Mia suggested, her initial fear giving way to fascination. "Maybe someone was transporting them and they got loose." Jack's expression hardened. "If these are someone's pets or experiments, they might come looking for them. We need to be careful." He studied the creatures more closely. "They don't look injured. In fact, they look healthy, alert." As they spoke, the smallest dragon, the green one, tilted its head and made a musical trilling sound, not unlike the noise that had awakened Mia. In response, the barn cat Whiskers approached the nest, showing none of the fear one would expect when confronted with predatory creatures. To the Harper's astonishment, the cat rubbed its head against the dragon's snout, purring loudly. "The animals aren't afraid of them," Mia whispered. "Look." Indeed, the barn's inhabitants seemed utterly unperturbed by the presence of the mythical creatures. If anything, they appeared protective, the horses watching vigilantly from their stalls, the cows positioned to block any approach from the rear of the barn. "What do we do with them?" Elise asked, her practical nature asserting itself through the shock. Jack ran a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. "We can't call animal control. They'd think we were crazy. Or worse, they'd take these creatures for some government lab to study." He sighed heavily. "For now, we keep them safe, keep them secret, and try to figure out where they came from." Mia's heart leapt. "So we're keeping them? At least for now?" Her father fixed her with a stern look. "For now, until we know more. But Mia, this stays between us. Not a word to anyone, not your friends, not your teachers, no one. Understood?" Mia nodded solemnly, even as excitement bubbled within her. Dragons, real dragons, right here in their barn. It was like something from her wildest dreams, and somehow, impossibly, it was happening to her. As the sun rose the following morning, the Harper family gathered in the barn to examine their mysterious guests more thoroughly. The dragons, having apparently decided the humans posed no immediate threat, allowed themselves to be observed with cautious tolerance. "They have these strange markings," Mia noted, pointing to the patterns that swirled across each dragon's scales. "See how they glow faintly? And they're different on each one." Jack nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "The markings almost look like constellations, star patterns." Elise, who had brought a small bowl of raw meat scraps from the kitchen, set it down near the nest. "Let's see if they're hungry." The dragons regarded the offering with intelligent curiosity. The largest, whose scales shimmered with predominantly ruby tones, was the first to approach. It sniffed the meat, then delicately consumed a piece, its tiny teeth surprisingly sharp. The others soon followed suit, eating with neat precision. "They're so civilized," Elise remarked. Not like wild animals at all. Because they're not animals, Mia said with certainty. At least, not like any animals we know. She'd spent the remainder of the night reading everything she could find about dragons in her books, though the fantastical descriptions hardly seemed to match the very real creatures before them. As they watched, the blue dragon suddenly spread its wings, delicate, translucent membranes supported by poor bone structures. It didn't attempt to fly, but seemed to be stretching, the wings catching the morning sunlight streaming through the barn windows and refracting it into dazzling patterns across the walls. "Beautiful," Elise murmured. A commotion from outside drew their attention, the sound of a vehicle approaching. Jack tensed, moving quickly to the barn door to peer outside. "It's Ted Gunderson from the next farm over," he reported, his voice tight with concern. "Probably coming to borrow the post hole digger again. Mia, stay with the dragons. Keep them quiet. Elise and I will head him off." As her parents hurried outside, Mia settled beside the nest. "You have to be quiet," she whispered to the dragons. "We have to keep you safe." To her amazement, the dragons seemed to understand. They huddled closer together, their trilling silenced, watching her with those eerily intelligent eyes. Through the barn walls, Mia could hear the muffled conversation, her father's forced casualness, her mother's too bright laughter, Ted's drawling questions about their recent meteor shower sighting. Meteor shower? Mia frowned. There hadn't been any meteor shower scheduled that she knew of. Her attention was drawn back to the dragons as the green one, apparently the boldest despite its smaller size, cautiously approached her. It stopped just beyond arm's reach, its head tilted inquisitively. "Hello there," Mia said softly. "I'm Mia. I guess you're staying with us for a while." The dragon made a soft chirruping sound. Then, to Mia's astonishment, it mimicked the inflection of her greeting perfectly. "Hello there." Mia's jaw dropped. "You can talk?" The dragon didn't respond with words again, but continued watching her with that unsettling intelligence. After a moment, it turned and waddled back to its siblings, leaving Mia to wonder if she'd imagined the whole thing. Outside, the conversation concluded, and Ted's truck rumbled away. Jack and Elise returned to the barn, looking troubled. "Ted says half the county saw strange lights in the sky 2 nights ago," Jack reported. "Calls to the sheriff's office about a meteor shower, but the university observatory says there wasn't one scheduled." "People are talking," Elise added, "saying the lights were too organized, too deliberate to be meteors." Mia glanced at the dragons, at the constellation-like patterns on their scales, at the perfectly circular nest of glowing hoof prints. A wild theory began to form in her mind, one too fantastic to voice aloud, even in the presence of living dragons. "Dad," she said instead, I think they might be intelligent. Really intelligent. The green one. It mimicked my voice, like it was trying to communicate." Jack's expression grew more concerned. "All the more reason to keep them hidden until we figure this out. I'll call in sick to the co-op today. We need to keep watch." As the day progressed, the dragons revealed more of their uncanny abilities. Mia discovered their healing powers quite by accident when she pricked her finger on a rusty nail while fetching fresh straw for their nest. The ruby dragon approached her, and before she could pull away, it pressed its snout to the small wound. A warm, tingling sensation spread from the point of contact, and when the dragon withdrew, the cut had vanished completely. "Dad! Mom! Look at this!" Mia called excitedly, showing them her healed finger and explaining what had happened. Jack's expression wavered between awe and concern. "These aren't natural creatures. Elise, whatever they are, wherever they came from." "I know," Elise said quietly, "but they don't seem dangerous. If anything, they seem helpful." Indeed, as the day wore on, the dragons demonstrated an almost eager desire to assist around the farm. When Jack mentioned that the tomato plants in the greenhouse were showing signs of blight, the blue dragon followed him there and breathed a fine mist over the affected plants. By evening, the wilted leaves had perked up, the spreading brown spots retreating. The most dramatic demonstration came when one of their sheep, heavy with lamb, went into a difficult labor. Elise, who normally handled the farm's animal births, found herself struggling as the ewe weakened with each contraction, the lamb seemingly stuck. "We're losing her," Elise said grimly, her arms bloodied to the elbows as she tried to reposition the lamb. "Jack, get the medical kit from the house. We might need to—" Her words cut off as the dragons, who had been watching intently from nearby, suddenly approached. Before anyone could stop them, all three pressed close to the laboring ewe, their scaled bodies forming a triangle around her distended belly. A soft humming vibration filled the air, and the ewe, who had been bleating in distress, suddenly calmed. "What are they doing?" Jack asked, half rising as if to pull them away. "Wait," Mia said, placing a restraining hand on her father's arm. "I think they're helping." Indeed, within minutes, the ew's contractions strengthened. Elise, with newfound ease, guided the lamb into the world, a healthy female with strong lungs and alert eyes. The dragons withdrew as the mother began cleaning her newborn, their task apparently complete. "I've never seen anything like it," Elise whispered, staring at the dragons with new respect. They somehow knew exactly what to do. The incident with the ewe seemed to cement the dragons' place on the farm, at least temporarily. They were no longer mysterious intruders, but helpful allies with gifts that defied explanation. That evening, as the family ate dinner at the kitchen table, the conversation inevitably turned to their scaled guests, now settled comfortably in a makeshift enclosure in the barn's tack room. "We can't keep this secret forever," Jack said, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. "Sooner or later, someone's going to notice something." "We need expert help," Elise agreed. "Someone who can examine them properly, maybe help us understand what they are and where they came from." Mia chewed her lip thoughtfully. "What about Dr. Patel, the new veterinarian who took over when Dr. Grayson retired? She seemed nice when she came to vaccinate the calves." Jack and Elise exchanged considering looks. "Dr. Patel does have that fancy degree from Cornell," Jack admitted. "And she was discreet when Thunder colicked last month. Didn't gossip about our barn conditions to the millers like old Grayson used to." "We could swear her to secrecy," Elise suggested. "Approach it carefully. It's risky," Jack warned. "But I don't see that we have much choice. These creatures need proper care, and we're in over our heads." And so it was decided. The following morning, Jack would call Dr. Neha Patel under the guise of a sick cow, then reveal the truth once she arrived. Mia went to bed that night with her mind racing, wondering what the veterinarian would make of their impossible house guests. She was nearly asleep when the now familiar trilling sound reached her ears, not from the barn this time, but from much closer. Mia sat up, startled to find the green dragon perched on her windowsill, its scales gleaming in the moonlight. "How did you get out?" she whispered, sliding from her bed to approach the creature. The dragon made no attempt to flee, watching her with those intelligent eyes. As Mia drew closer, she noticed something clutched in its forepaws, a wilted flower from her mother's garden. The dragon extended the bloom toward her, almost like an offering. Hesitantly, Mia accepted the gift. The moment her fingers touched the drooping petals, the dragon leaned forward and exhaled a gentle breath across the flower. Before her eyes, the wilted bloom straightened, its colors intensifying, life flowing back into its form until it was more vibrant than it had ever been in the garden. "Wow," Mia breathed, staring at the revitalized flower, then at the dragon. "Thank you," the dragon chirruped softly, Then, to Mia's shock, it pressed its snout gently against her forehead. A cascade of images flooded her mind, stars wheeling against the void of space. A world with 3 moons hanging in a purple sky, crystalline cities nestled in mountains that floated above a turbulent surface. Mia gasped, stumbling backward as the connection broke. The dragon watched her reaction with what could only be described as concern. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her hand pressed to her forehead where the dragon had touched her. "What did you just show me?" The dragon trilled softly, but offered no further visions. After a moment, it turned and, with surprising agility, climbed down the side of the house using its claws and disappeared into the darkness, presumably returning to the barn. Mia stood frozen by her window, the revitalized flower still clutched in her hand, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd just experienced. The dragon hadn't just communicated with her. It had shared memories of another world entirely. These weren't just strange animals. They weren't even just intelligent creatures. They were something far more extraordinary. And Mia was beginning to suspect they hadn't been abandoned at all. They'd been sent. Dr. Neha Patel arrived at the Harper farm precisely at 9 the following morning, her sleek silver sedan looking out of place amid the mud and gravel of the farmyard. She was a striking woman in her early 40s, with intelligent dark eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that had quickly earned her the respect of the county's farmers since she'd taken over the veterinary practice 6 months earlier. "Jack," she greeted, shaking his hand firmly as she stepped from her vehicle. "You mentioned a cow with unusual symptoms. Neurological, you said?" Jack shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the barn where Elise and Mia waited with the dragons. "About that, Dr. Patel, there isn't actually a sick cow." The veterinarian's eyebrows rose. "I see. Is this about the bill for Thunder's treatment? Because we can discuss a payment plan if—" "No, nothing like that," Jack interrupted. "We found something impossible, and we need your professional expertise, along with your absolute discretion." Dr. Patel's expression shifted from confusion to cautious interest. "Go on. It's better if I show you," Jack said, gesturing toward the barn. "But before we go in there, I need your word that what you see stays between us, at least for now." The veterinarian studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Patient confidentiality extends to unusual cases. Mr. Harper, you have my word." Jack led her to the barn, pausing at the entrance. "Just try to keep an open mind. Inside." Elise and Mia stood beside the dragon's enclosure, the 3 creatures alert and watching the doorway expectantly, as if they'd been awaiting this introduction. Dr. Patel stopped dead in her tracks, her medical bag dropping from suddenly nerveless fingers. "Those are—" she began, then stopped, unable to complete the sentence. "Dragons," Mia supplied helpfully. "We found them 3 nights ago." The veterinarian approached slowly, her scientific training apparently overriding her shock. This isn't possible," she murmured, kneeling to observe the creatures more closely. "Reptilian features, but the wing structure, and their eyes." "We were hoping you could examine them," Elise explained. "Make sure they're healthy. Help us understand what they might need." Dr. Patel nodded distractedly, already opening her medical bag. "I'll need to take samples, blood, scales if possible, their body temperature, heart rate." She glanced up at the Harpers. "You realize that these creatures represent a biological impossibility. Nothing in evolutionary science can explain that." "We know," Jack said grimly. "That's why we called you. You're the only one with the expertise to help us figure this out." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Patel conducted a thorough examination of each dragon, her initial shock giving way to professional fascination. The dragons, for their part, submitted to her poking and prodding with surprising patience, almost as if they understood the purpose of the examination. Remarkable, she muttered repeatedly, making notes in a small leather-bound journal rather than her usual digital tablet. Their body temperature is higher than any reptile I've ever encountered, nearly 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Heart rate similar to birds, but with 4 chambers plus what appears to be an auxiliary chamber I can't explain. And these markings. She traced a finger above the constellation-like patterns on the blue dragon scales, careful not to touch them directly. They appear to be bioluminescent, and they're organized in patterns that correspond to no known terrestrial star systems. Mia exchanged a glance with her parents. So they're not from here? From Earth? Dr. Patel looked up, her expression deadly serious. I can't say for certain what they are or where they originated, but I can tell you with absolute scientific certainty that they represent a biology that did not evolve on this planet. She sat back on her heels. In other words, Mia, you've discovered something truly extraordinary, possibly the first confirmed extraterrestrial life forms on Earth. The pronouncement hung in the air, giving voice to what they had all suspected but had been afraid to articulate. What do we do? Elise asked quietly. Contact the authorities? The government? Dr. Patel's expression darkened. I wouldn't recommend that. Not yet. Think about it. Best case scenario. These creatures are taken for study, likely never to be returned. Worst case. She didn't finish the thought. They're not just animals, Mia said suddenly. They're intelligent. They can communicate. She hesitated, then shared her experience from the previous night, the gift of the flower, the mind touch that had shown her visions of another world. Dr. Patel listened intently, her scientific skepticism warring with the evidence of the impossible creatures before her. If what you're saying is true, then these aren't merely alien animals. They're sentient beings. That changes everything. It means we have a responsibility to protect them. Jack concluded, his farmer's practical nature asserting itself through the fantastic circumstances. At least until we understand why they're here. As they spoke, the dragons watched them with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. The ruby one suddenly raised its head, nostrils flaring as if scenting something on the air. It emitted a sharp trill that caused the others to stiffen in alertness. What is it? Mia asked, moving closer to the enclosure. What's wrong? Before anyone could respond, a low, vibrating hum filled the air, not coming from the dragons this time, but from outside the barn, above them. The sound grew in intensity until the tools hanging on the walls began to rattle. Jack rushed to the barn door, throwing it open to look outside. My God, he breathed. The others joined him, stepping out into the yard to stare up at the source of the disturbance. Hovering perhaps 500 feet above the farmhouse was a sleek, silent craft, metallic and oval-shaped, about the size of a school bus, with no visible propulsion system. It emitted a soft blue glow reminiscent of the hoof prints that had formed the dragon's nest. It's them, Mia whispered. They've come back for the dragons. Even as she spoke, she felt a tug at her jeans. Looking down, she saw the green dragon beside her, having somehow slipped out of the barn unnoticed. To her astonishment, it positioned itself protectively in front of her, wings half spread, facing the hovering craft. The other 2 dragons emerged moments later, arranging themselves in a defensive formation around the humans. They're protecting us? Dr. Patel said incredulously. Before anyone could respond, a beam of light shot from the underside of the craft, widening into a column that touched down in the center of the yard. Within the column, a figure began to materialize, humanoid but clearly not human, with elongated limbs and a head that seemed slightly too large for its slender body. Its skin, if it could be called that, shimmered with the same iridescence as the dragon's scales. The being stepped forward, the light column dissipating behind it. In the full daylight, its alien nature was even more apparent. It had no visible mouth. Its large eyes were faceted like an insect's, and what had appeared to be clothing was actually part of its exoskeleton, ridged and segmented. The dragons, surprisingly, made no move to approach their presumed keeper. Instead, they maintained their protective stance around the humans. The alien raised a 7-fingered hand, palm outward in what seemed like a universal gesture of peace. Then, it pressed a small device at what might have been its throat. And a voice emerged, clearly artificial, but speaking perfect English. "We mean no harm," it said, the words slightly out of sync with subtle movements on its face. "We have come for the Guardians." Jack stepped forward, placing himself between the alien and his family. "Are those your creatures?" he asked, gesturing to the dragons. "Did you leave them here?" The alien's head tilted in a disturbingly human gesture of consideration. "They were sent, not abandoned. Entrusted." "Entrusted to whom?" Elise asked, one arm protectively around Mia's shoulders. In answer, the alien raised its hand again, and a holographic projection appeared in the air between them, a swirling image of a world that Mia recognized instantly from her vision. 3 moons, purple sky, floating mountains with crystalline cities. "Our world," the alien explained. "Dying." The projection changed, showing the once beautiful planet now ravaged, oceans boiling, mountains crumbling, cities in ruins. The crystalline structures that had gleamed so brightly in Mia's vision were now dull and fractured. "Ecological collapse," Dr. Patel murmured, her scientific mind grasping the implications even as the fantastical nature of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. "Their planet is dying." The alien nodded. "The Guardians were our last hope, sent to find compatible worlds, to find worthy caretakers." All eyes turned to the dragons, who remained in their protective formation, unmoving. "You're saying these dragons are some kind of scouts?" Jack asked incredulously. "Ambassadors," the alien corrected. "They carry within them the genetic legacy of our world, the means to heal, to restore balance." Mia suddenly understood. "The flower," she said. "When the green one breathed on that wilted flower, it didn't just heal it, it made it stronger, more vibrant than before." The alien's attention fixed on Mia, its faceted eyes seeming to study her with new interest. "You have communed with a guardian." It wasn't a question, but Mia nodded anyway. "It showed me your world, the way it used to be." "The Guardians choose their companions with care," the alien said. "They sensed in you a kindred spirit, a protector." "Wait," Jack interjected, struggling to keep pace with these revelations. "Are you saying these dragons, these Guardians, chose us? This farm, my daughter?" "The Guardians were sent to many places," the alien explained. "To find those who would understand their purpose, who would help them fulfill their mission." "Which is what, exactly?" Dr. Patel asked, her scientific curiosity evident in her voice. The alien gestured, and the holographic projection changed again, this time showing Earth, their familiar blue planet, but with subtle differences. The oceans were clearer, the land masses greener, the atmospheric patterns more stable. "To heal your world before it follows the path of ours," the alien said simply. "To prevent the same mistakes, to forge an alliance between our species that might save both." The implications were staggering. Mia looked down at the green dragon, still positioned protectively before her. "Is that why you came to my window last night? To show me what was at stake?" The dragon trilled softly, and though it didn't use words, Mia somehow understood its affirmation. The alien took a step closer, its movements fluid and graceful despite its otherworldly appearance. "The bond has already begun. The smallest guardian has chosen you. Mia Harper." Mia's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" "The Guardians have shared their experiences, their choice." The alien's artificial voice somehow conveyed respect. They believe you, all of you, can help them fulfill their purpose. Jack and Elise exchanged looks of parental concern. "This is our daughter you're talking about," Jack said firmly. "She's 12 years old. Whatever interplanetary mission you have in mind." "Dad," Mia interrupted, placing a hand on her father's arm. I think this is important. Really important." The green dragon chirruped its agreement, moving to stand beside Mia rather than in front of her now, its scaled shoulder pressing against her leg in a gesture that felt surprisingly companionable. Before anyone could respond further, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the tense conversation. Multiple engines. Moving fast. "Government vehicles," the alien said, its head turning toward the farm's entrance. "Your species' authorities have detected our arrival." Indeed. Within moments, a convoy of black SUVs and military trucks came barreling up the farm's long driveway, dust billowing behind them. They screeched to a halt in a loose semicircle around the gathered group, and armed personnel in unmarked tactical gear poured out, weapons raised. "Federal agents, nobody move!" shouted a stern-faced woman in a dark suit, her government credentials displayed prominently as she approached. "This area is now under the jurisdiction of the United States government." The dragons immediately moved into a defensive formation, placing themselves between the armed agents and the Harper family. Their scales bristled, small tendrils of smoke rising from their nostrils. The alien remained perfectly still, its faceted eyes taking in the new arrivals with what might have been curiosity. "Step away from the extraterrestrial entities," the agent commanded, her gun trained steadily on the alien. "You are interfering with a matter of national security." Jack moved forward, hands raised placatingly. "Now hold on just a minute. This is private property, and these visitors haven't done anything wrong." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back," the agent replied, her tone brooking no argument. "We have orders to secure any and all non-terrestrial life forms." Mia watched in horror as more agents approached, some carrying what looked like specialized containment equipment. They were going to take the dragons, take them to be studied, experimented on, separated from each other, from her. "No," she cried, stepping forward despite her parents' attempts to hold her back. "You can't take them. They're here to help us." The green dragon moved with her, still by her side, while the other two maintained their protective stance. The lead agent's eyes widened at the sight of the girl and dragon moving in tandem. "Mia, get back here," Jack called desperately. But Mia stood her ground. "They're called Guardians," she said, addressing the agent directly. "They were sent here to help save our planet. If you take them away, lock them up, you'll be ruining our one chance to—" Her words were cut short as one of the armed men, apparently spooked by the smoke emanating from the ruby dragon's nostrils, fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack of the gunfire sent the farm animals into a panic, horses whinnying in their stalls, cows bellowing in the fields. The dragons, however, didn't flee. Instead, they seemed to grow more determined, the patterns on their scales glowing brighter, their protective stance unwavering. It was the blue dragon that moved first, darting suddenly toward the agent who had fired his weapon. Several guns swiveled to track it, fingers tensing on triggers. "Don't shoot!" Mia screamed. To everyone's astonishment, the dragon didn't attack. Instead, it stopped directly in front of the agent, who had fallen backward in surprise and now clutched his right arm. Mia realized he must have injured himself in the fall. The blue dragon leaned forward and, before anyone could intervene, pressed its snout to the man's arm. There was a moment of tense silence. Then the agent's expression changed from fear to wonder. "My arm," he said, flexing the previously injured limb. "It was sprained, maybe broken, but now—" He stared at the dragon in astonishment. "It healed me." A murmur ran through the assembled agents. The lead agent stepped forward, her weapon still raised, but her expression now uncertain. What did it just do? She demanded. Dr. Patel, who had been observing silently, chose this moment to speak. It healed him, she explained, her professional demeanor apparently giving her words weight even in this extraordinary situation. These creatures have remarkable regenerative abilities they're apparently willing to share. The alien, which had remained motionless throughout the confrontation, now addressed the lead agent directly. The Guardians mean no harm to your species. They were sent to forge an alliance, to share knowledge that might prevent your world from suffering the same fate as ours. The agent's composure wavered, her training clearly not having prepared her for direct communication with an extraterrestrial being. I have orders to secure— Perhaps, Jack interrupted, his farmer's practicality asserting itself once more. You should call your superiors and explain the situation. These aren't threats to be contained, they're ambassadors. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for an unexpected development. One of the younger agents, a woman barely out of her 20s, suddenly gasped and clutched her abdomen, doubling over in pain. Sullivan's pregnant, another agent explained as they rushed to help her. She's been having complications, shouldn't even be in the field, but we were short-staffed for this deployment. The ruby dragon, which had remained by Elise's side, suddenly perked up, its head swiveling toward the distressed agent. Before anyone could stop it, it darted across the yard to the pregnant woman. Get away from her, shouted several agents, weapons raised once more. But Elise, who had witnessed the dragon's healing abilities firsthand with the laboring ewe, called out, Wait, let it help her. The pregnant agent looked up fearfully as the ruby dragon approached, but her pain apparently overrode her training. She remained still as the dragon gently pressed its snout to her rounded belly. A warm glow spread from the point of contact, illuminating the agent's abdomen from within. The woman's expression shifted from pain to wonder, then to tearful relief. The pain's gone, she whispered, her hands cradling her belly protectively. And the baby, I can feel it moving normally again. Strong kicks. The lead agent stared, her weapon now lowered to her side. How is this possible? As I said, the alien reiterated, the Guardians were sent to help, to heal, to forge an alliance that might benefit both our species. In that moment, the dynamic shifted perceptibly. The immediate threat of violence receded as the agents processed what they had just witnessed. The dragons, seemingly satisfied that their point had been made, returned to their positions near the Harper family, though their posture was now less defensive, more alert and observant. Agent Rawlins, the lead agent said, addressing a senior colleague, contact Director Hayes. Tell him we have a first contact situation. Peaceful, medical implications, potential alliance. She holstered her weapon entirely, a gesture that prompted the other agents to lower their guns as well. And tell him I'm invoking Protocol Theta 9. Mia didn't know what Protocol Theta 9 might be, but judging by the reactions of the other agents, it was significant. Some looked surprised, others relieved. That protocol hasn't been used since one began. I know, the lead agent interrupted, but I think this qualifies as an extraordinary circumstance. Don't you? She approached the Harper family, her demeanor now professional but considerably less threatening. I'm Special Agent Diana Keller, National Security Division. I apologize for our abrupt arrival. We detected an unidentified craft entering Earth's atmosphere on a direct course for this location. Jack nodded stiffly. These creatures, these Guardians, showed up in our barn 3 nights ago. The ship arrived just before you did. Agent Keller glanced at the alien, then at the dragons. And they've made no hostile moves, no threats. None, Elise confirmed. If anything, they've been helpful, healing our animals, our plants. They seem to want to coexist. Agent Keller considered this, then made a decision. We're going to need to establish a secure perimeter around your farm. for your protection as much as for containment purposes. And we'll need detailed statements from all of you. You're not taking the dragons, Mia said, the statement more demand than question. Agent Keller studied the girl and the green dragon still faithfully by her side. Protocol Theta 9 is designed for peaceful first contact scenarios. It prioritizes diplomatic engagement over military containment. She paused. So no, for now. We're not taking the Guardians anywhere. But this situation is unprecedented, and I can't make promises about what happens next. It was, Mia supposed, the best they could hope for under the circumstances. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. More government vehicles arrived, along with teams of scientists who set up equipment around the perimeter of the farm. The alien visitor, who introduced itself as emissary, agreed to a preliminary diplomatic exchange with senior officials who arrived via helicopter. The dragons, interestingly, showed no inclination to return to the ship with their presumed sender. Instead, they remained close to the Harper family, particularly to Mia, whom they seemed to have collectively adopted as their primary human companion. As evening approached, Agent Keller found Mia sitting on the porch steps. The green dragon curled beside her like an oversized, scaly cat. The other two dragons were nearby, watching the government scientists with what appeared to be curious interest. "How are you holding up?" the agent asked, sitting down beside the girl. Mia shrugged. "It's been a weird day." Agent Keller laughed softly. "That's an understatement." She studied the green dragon, which regarded her with equal curiosity. "They seem very attached to you." "The emissary said they chose me. Chose our farm." Mia stroked the dragon's scaled head, marveling at how quickly she'd grown accustomed to its otherworldly presence. "I think they were looking for people who would understand what they're trying to do." "And what is that, exactly?" Agent Keller asked, her tone conversational, but her attention sharp. Mia considered how to explain what she'd learned, both from the emissary's formal statements and from her own growing connection with the dragons. "Their world is dying because they didn't take care of it properly. They developed technology without considering the consequences. They want to help us avoid making the same mistakes." "Noble goal," Agent Keller acknowledged. "But why dragons? Why take the form of creatures from our mythology?" It was a question Mia had pondered herself. I think maybe they've been here before, a long time ago. Maybe that's where our dragon stories came from in the first place." The green dragon trilled softly, as if in confirmation. Agent Keller's eyebrows rose. "You think you can understand it?" "Not words," Mia explained, "but feelings, intentions, sometimes images." She hesitated, then added, "The emissary said we've formed a bond, that it's still developing." "Fascinating," Agent Keller murmured. She was silent for a moment, then said, "You know, the next few days are going to be complicated. The world is about to learn that we're not alone in the universe. That changes everything." Mia nodded solemnly. "Are people going to be scared?" "Some will be," the agent admitted. "Change is always frightening, especially change this big. But these guardians of yours have already demonstrated their benevolent intentions. That's going to help a lot." "They're not really mine," Mia said, though the green dragon pressed closer to her side as if to contradict this statement. Agent Keller smiled slightly. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." She stood, brushing dust from her suit pants. "Get some rest, Mia. Tomorrow's going to be another big day." Indeed. The following morning brought news crews from around the world, held at bay by a newly established military checkpoint at the end of the farm's long driveway. The story had broken overnight: alien contact at a small Midwestern farm. Dragons from another world. The potential for an interplanetary alliance with profound implications for Earth's future. Jack and Elise did their best to shield Mia from the chaos, but it soon became apparent that she had a crucial role to play. The dragons responded most readily to her. and, through her, they seemed willing to interact with the various scientists and officials who had been granted access to the farm. A week after the initial contact, Mia found herself in an unprecedented position, testifying before a special session of the United Nations, with the Green Dragon, now officially named Ember by Mia, by her side. The other two dragons, Ruby and Sapphire, named for their predominant scale colors, remained at the farm with her parents, continuing to demonstrate their healing abilities to selected scientific observers. The General Assembly Hall fell silent as Mia approached the podium, Ember walking solemnly beside her. At 12 years old, she was certainly the youngest person ever to address this august body, but the circumstances were extraordinary enough that protocol had been set aside. "Distinguished delegates," Mia began, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Mia Harper, and this is Ember, one of 3 guardians who came to our farm 8 days ago." Ember trilled softly, the sound carrying through the hall's perfect acoustics. Several delegates gasped at this direct evidence of the dragon's voice. "The guardians and their emissary have come to Earth with an important message," Mia continued, gaining confidence as she spoke. "Their world is dying because they didn't take care of it. They developed technology without thinking about how it would affect their environment. They made choices that seemed good at the time, but led to disaster." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, representatives from every nation on Earth, all focused intently on her words. "They don't want us to make the same mistakes. They've seen our world, studied our history. They know we're heading down a similar path. But they also believe it's not too late for us to change course." Ember suddenly spread his wings, larger now than when he'd first arrived, his growth accelerating with each passing day. The constellation-like patterns on his scales glowed brightly, casting ethereal patterns across the hall's walls and ceiling. "The Guardians have gifts to share with us," Mia explained. "Healing abilities we've already witnessed, knowledge about sustainable energy sources, ways to repair environmental damage. But they're not just giving us technology, they're offering a partnership, a chance to learn from their mistakes instead of repeating them." One of the delegates, a distinguished woman representing a small island nation particularly threatened by climate change, raised her hand. "Young Ms. Harper, these are extraordinary claims. How can we be certain these Guardians truly have Earth's best interests at heart?" It was a fair question, one that had been debated extensively in the days since the contact. Mia nodded acknowledgement. The Guardians could have arrived with weapons, with demands. Instead, they came as hatchlings, vulnerable, seeking connection. They've demonstrated nothing but a desire to help, healing injured animals, revitalizing dying plants, even helping people who are sick or hurt. She placed a hand on Ember's scaled head. "They chose our farm because we care for our land, for our animals. They're looking for that same spirit of stewardship on a global scale." Another delegate, this one representing a major industrial power, spoke next. "And what do these Guardians want in return for their assistance?" Mia had anticipated this question as well. "Their world is dying, but some of their people survive. The emissary has explained that they hope to eventually establish a colony here, not as invaders, but as refugees seeking sanctuary. They bring knowledge and abilities that could benefit Earth in exchange for a new home." The hall erupted in murmurs at this revelation. The Secretary General called for order, then addressed Mia directly. "Miss Harper, you have developed a unique bond with these creatures, these Guardians. In your assessment, does this proposed arrangement represent a threat to humanity?" Mia considered her answer carefully. In the days since the dragons had arrived, her connection with them, particularly with Ember, had deepened considerably. She could now sense not just images and emotions, but concepts, intentions, the outlines of thoughts not quite translatable into human language. "No, Mr. Secretary General, I don't believe it does, she answered finally. The Guardians understand that their survival depends on Earth's survival. They have no interest in depleting another world's resources. They've already learned that lesson the hard way. What they're proposing is a genuine partnership, with both sides contributing and both sides benefiting. She took a deep breath, then continued. The emissary has told us that there were once many worlds in their alliance, before the ecological collapse. Worlds with different species, different cultures, all sharing knowledge and resources. They believe Earth could be part of rebuilding that network, not just surviving, but thriving. The Secretary General nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Harper. The General Assembly will now deliberate on the information presented and consider the emissary's proposal for a formal alliance. As Mia and Ember were escorted from the podium, the hall once again erupted in discussion, representatives from every nation on Earth debating the implications of what they had just heard. The possibilities inherent in this unprecedented contact. In the anteroom, Mia found her parents waiting, along with Agent Keller, who had become something of an ally in navigating the complex diplomatic waters. You did wonderfully, Elise said, embracing her daughter tightly. We're so proud of you. Jack nodded agreement, his expression a mixture of pride and lingering concern. Not exactly what I had in mind when I wished for you to find your path in life, but... He smiled wryly. Can't argue with the results. Agent Keller approached, offering a rare smile. Preliminary reports indicate favorable reception from a majority of member states. There's still debate, of course, but the momentum is shifting toward acceptance of the alliance proposal. Ember trilled happily, butting his head against Mia's hip in a gesture that had become familiar over the past week. Through their strengthening bond, she sensed his satisfaction, his growing hope. What happens next? Mia asked, scratching the spot just behind Ember's head crest that she knew he particularly enjoyed. Formal negotiations. Agent Keller replied. Establishment of contact protocols, likely the creation of a new international body to oversee the alliance. She regarded Mia thoughtfully. And for you and your family, some decisions to make. The Guardians have chosen you, particularly you, Mia. That makes you an essential part of this process moving forward. Mia nodded, understanding the implications. Her life had changed irrevocably the moment she discovered the dragons in her barn. There was no going back to the simple farm existence she'd known before, only forward, into a future suddenly expanding with possibilities beyond imagination. 1 month later, Mia stood on the hillside overlooking the farm, watching as construction crews worked on the new structures that would house the Dragon-Human Alliance headquarters. The government had purchased adjoining land, expanding the Harper property into a sprawling campus while preserving the original farmhouse and barn, the historic site of first contact. Ember, now the size of a large dog and still growing, lounged beside her in the warm sunshine. Ruby and Sapphire were down below, participating in a demonstration of their healing abilities for a group of international medical researchers. Additional Guardian eggs had arrived on a second ship 2 weeks earlier, with more promised in the coming months, each destined for carefully selected locations around the globe. It's really happening, isn't it? Mia said softly, more to herself than to Ember. Everything's changing. Ember rumbled agreement, his thoughts touching hers with increasingly sophisticated clarity. He shared an image of the future, Guardians and humans working together, the damaged places of Earth healing, the skies clearing, new technologies blossoming. Mia smiled, returning an image of her own, the barn on that first night, her initial fear giving way to wonder. I never imagined finding dragons would lead to all this. The best discoveries often reveal our greatest responsibilities, came a voice from behind her. Mia turned to find the emissary approaching, its movements now familiar despite their alienness. In the weeks since contact, it had learned to modulate its artificial voice to better convey emotion. and Mia had learned to interpret the subtle movements of its faceplates as expressions. "The first refugee ship has entered your solar system," the emissary informed her. 2,000 of my kind, bringing with them seeds and specimens from our world, those we managed to preserve before the collapse. "Are you excited to see your people again?" Mia asked. The emissary's faceplates shifted in what Mia had come to recognize as their equivalent of a smile. "I am, and I am grateful that they will find welcome here. Not universal welcome." Mia knew. There were still those who protested the alliance, who feared the implications of extraterrestrial integration. But they were a dwindling minority as the benefits of the partnership became increasingly apparent. Medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration techniques, sustainable energy technologies beyond Earth's current capabilities. "The Guardians continue to grow and thrive," the emissary observed, gesturing toward Ember. "Their connection to human companions strengthens. This is more successful than we dared hope." Mia stroked Ember's scales, feeling the warmth radiating from his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "He's part of our family now. They all are, in a way, and we are becoming one community." The emissary agreed. Two species, linked by common purpose. Below them, a tour group of school children had arrived, gathering excitedly around Ruby and Sapphire. The dragons were surprisingly patient with children, seeming to understand instinctively the importance of fostering wonder and acceptance in the younger generation. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all started in our barn," Mia said, watching as one brave child tentatively reached out to touch Ruby's scales under careful supervision. "Just an ordinary night on an ordinary farm. There is no such thing as an ordinary life." "Mia Harper," the emissary replied. "Only extraordinary moments waiting to be discovered." Ember rumbled agreement, sharing a final image that made Mia laugh, herself as an old woman, surrounded by dragons of all sizes. The landscape around them transformed into a harmonious blend of Earth and alien ecosystems. Humanity and the emissary's people living and working side by side. A future built on empathy and understanding. A partnership of worlds. A second chance for two species to get it right. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Mia Harper, no longer just a farmer's daughter, but a bridge between worlds, stood with her dragon and watched the new world taking shape before her eyes. The impossible had become possible. The extraordinary had become everyday, and somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other civilizations were taking notice, preparing perhaps to join the alliance that had begun with 3 small dragons and 1 brave girl. The universe, it seemed, was full of possibilities. One just had to be willing to open the barn door and look inside.